In today's video, we're going to be talking about the top 5 cities in Florida that are slated to take the biggest dives in price. I know many of you don't like when I use the term the bubble burst, whether it is a slow burn out the bottom or it's a big burst, it doesn't matter. Loss of value is loss of value. So I'm going to talk to you today about the 5 cities that have been deemed by Yahoo News. They've analyzed it and they have determined that these are the cities that are going to see the biggest drops in price in 2024 through the next 3 to 5 years. So that's really important because a lot of people that move to Florida, they live in Florida for 3 years and then they move. 5 years is the next mark and 7 years is the next. So that's the time frame that many times people leave Florida. So you don't want to buy in an upside down position, not having anticipated that the prices are going to drop. And then you're in trouble when you're ready to move if it didn't work out for you and you didn't like it. So let's kind of buzz through the cities that Yahoo News thinks are going to have the biggest reductions in price. And I'm going to talk you through it as well and let you know my thoughts on it. So I've got them here in front of me. Number 1 is Tampa. Now, when they say Tampa, you have to kind of wonder, are they talking about the entire metro area of Tampa, because that's big? Or is it specific to areas like the Clearwater Beach area or St. Pete or St. Petersburg, something like that? Is it section to section? Unfortunately, they didn't tell us what they thought. They took it as the entire Tampa Bay metropolitan area. So for me, when I look at that, I would say that, yeah, there are a lot of areas in Tampa that are seeing significant price reductions. And I think that mostly has a lot to do with the fact that flood insurance is very, very high there. Pinellas County is a county that they have so much flooding in that area. It's really hard to get homeowners insurance there. That's an area that's always had a problem, and we're seeing a lot of property on the market there right now because there are many pockets that it's impossible to get insurance at all because of that. So with the hurricane predictions out the way that they are in 2024, and we're in it right now, you're seeing a lot of people step back from that area. Now, there's a lot of different parts of Tampa that there are areas that sit a little higher, areas that sit lower, but for the most part, that area is riddled with floodplain. And I would say that that has a lot to do with their expectations. Number 2, Miami, and I'm going to say that this is the same problem. When you say Miami, you're talking about such a large area. There are parts of Miami that are not seeing any price reduction almost at all. That tends to be the coastal area. The coastal areas tend to hold value, so there's only so much waterfront, and it's very expensive. Generally speaking, somebody that's going to buy waterfront in Miami can almost afford whatever they want. It is not cheap. So that aside, when you get into Miami as a whole, there is an abundance of property for sale in Miami. Condo after row of condo after row of condo. They are having a significant problem over there with the structural engineer reports that are coming out that are asking these condominium buildings to be retrofit for today's standards. We're talking about major renovations, building structures, elevator shafts, many, many things that have to be rebuilt, redone, and who's going to pay for that? Well, those are the special assessments that you're hearing about. I have a video out on that talking about that. There really is not anything you can do about it. If you get hit with a $200,000, $300,000 assessment for your one unit, and yes, that's happening all over Miami, then you're either going to have to pay it or the buyer has to pay it. You would have to sell and pass it on to the buyer. That is the problem right now, significant problem in Miami. And then also Miami proper has the same flooding problem. And also Miami proper has a flooding issue just like Tampa does. There are certain areas that are low-lying and the streets tend to flood pretty badly. So those are both, again, insurance and HOA. That's a common theme that you're going to find here in Florida with values dropping. All right, the third one, and this is right in my backyard, Fort Myers. So what happened with Fort Myers is property values went through the roof. So Fort Myers was always kind of like the stepchild to Naples. Nobody wanted to be in Fort Myers. Well, Fort Myers started to grow, and the closer it was to Estero, Bonita Springs, it all started to connect to some degree. Now listen, there's still a lot of people out there that they don't like Fort Myers. They want something a little bit more resorty. They want something that feels more like Naples. But Fort Myers is kind of it's a city in itself. It's not as big, obviously, as Tampa or Miami, but it's a nice sized little city, and there's a lot in Fort Myers, but it feels more like you're living in the suburbs in a tropical area versus you're living in a tropical resort style area. But what happened was when people during the times of the virus, when everybody was flocking to Florida, that became an area that people moved to because it's very year-round. It's easy to live there year-round because that is sort of what it's built for. It's easy to live there year-round. There's lots of shopping. There's doctor's offices, hospitals, retail. There's employment there. There's not sort of like big corporations so much as some of these other bigger cities like Tampa or Miami, but you can live and work there more so maybe than like a Naples where it's a lot more second home driven. So a lot of people moved to Fort Myers, which made the values go up through the roof. Well, everything that comes up has to come down, and when the hurricane hit, that was just the perfect storm between that enormous raise in value and then that entire area taking such a huge hit, not just Fort Myers Beach, but also parts of Fort Myers. It just was the perfect situation to see values crash. And right now, if you're an investor, that might not be a bad area for you to be targeting, because that area and Cape Coral as well, those areas are seeing enormous reductions in price. And then from Fort Myers, we're going to shift just a little bit north of that to Punta Gorda. So Punta Gorda is about 30 minutes or so north of Fort Myers, and it's always been known as like a sleepy little town. There's boating there. There's lovely boating there. There's a place called Fisherman's Village, which is sort of like an open air shopping, boutique-y restaurants. There's a marina there. There's a little bit of question if that's going to stay in that situation, but outside of that, it's mainly just houses and a little downtown area. So it's always been a little bit of a sleepy town, but during the boom, it went crazy. You used to be able to buy a canal home not long ago. I'm talking about 5-6 years ago. You could buy a canal home in Punta Gorda, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, boat in the backyard, pool in the backyard. You could buy that for around $400,000. Well, literally it felt like overnight that was $700,000. So again, just like Fort Myers, it took that big jump. So people were looking at it sort of like, well, I could live here year round, and maybe I could work at the hospital in Fort Myers. Maybe I could work in the entertainment field or the hospitality field in Fort Myers, and it's only a half-hour drive, and I have all this preferred pricing in the $400,000 range. But then it jumped, and it also got hit by Hurricane Ian. Same thing that happened to Fort Myers happened to Punta Gorda. So as those values came up, and as people hit that 3-5-7 year mark, people start leaving, and we've got a problem with value because, again, on water, which was pretty much where everybody wanted to be, it's very expensive to live there, and most of those homes are now tilting a little bit upside down. And then the last one would be Northport, that they've identified as being problematic. Now, Northport is a little bit north again from Punta Gorda. So it starts to get into that what we now call Welland Park. There's an area called Welland Park, and it tips on a lot of those. You've got areas of Northport, a little bit of Venice, a little bit of Inglewood, all in this area with a little cute little downtown area. I like Welland Park. I think it's really nice. New builds in there. But in Northport, which surrounds that, so to speak, that's always been considered a rural area. And you could buy something. So you could buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. Some of them had pools, some did not. But you could buy something with a little bit of land. Very little in terms of communities. It was mainly houses on land. And by land, I mean half acre, maybe even more than that. So kind of for people that wanted to have a little bit of separation from their neighbors. But there's not really been much to do in Northport. You know, there's not a lot of shopping. There's your typical stuff, but there's not a lot of anything that says, I am in Florida living in a resort community. That's why they built Welland Park, to give you that sort of feel. But Northport as a whole has always kind of appealed to people that want a little bit of distance between their neighbors. They want to garden. They want to do what they want to do. Well, in recent years, like the last 24 months, Northport started putting a lot of rules in. They started getting very rural focused, and people did not like that. There's also a lot of little pieces of land in Northport, like little residential lots that someone can build on. Well, that sets itself up in Florida for a lot of fraud. Over the past couple years, the fraud that we've seen in the company I work for, much of it has come out of Northport in those residential lots. You really have to be careful. If you see something on Craigslist or you see something on the website that rhymes with pillow and you think it's real and it appears to be too good to be true, it probably is. So you have to be very, very careful with that. There are ways to protect yourself from that. Again, always get with a good agent. And, you know, I always say this in my videos, but I know I get new people all the time. I will leave a link down below in the description box. If you want to do a consultation with me, let's talk about your goals. Let's talk about what you're looking to buy. Even if you're not looking to buy right now, you're thinking about 2025, maybe you're thinking about a couple of years from now, but you want to get prepared so you don't make any mistakes kind of working up to your retirement to Florida, book some time with me down below. I'd love to dive into what you're looking to do, and we can get it all lined out for you so that you have a working plan, whether your move is soon or a little bit later. So always, I have that link down below for you if you're interested in that. But Northport in itself kind of boomed the same way that some of these other cities boomed, but it just wasn't prepared for it. So now we have a lot of people that thought Northport would feel like Naples, would feel like Fort Myers, and it didn't, and they don't love it, and it's not where they've decided they want to be, but they overpaid for their property. And now they're in a position where there isn't anything there. That didn't bother them, but that does mean a lot to people that are buying in Southwest Florida. There is no beach in Northport. Now there's one nearby, but there is no beach. And that's one of those things, you know, if you look at the cities that they're anticipating to have the reductions, Tampa, so you do have to go to Clearwater, or you have to go where the beach is. They have a bay in Tampa, but you have to drive to where the beach is. Miami, it depends where you live. Fort Myers, well, you have Fort Myers Beach, but Fort Myers Beach is different than Fort Myers. There's not a beach in Fort Myers. There's a little inlet section, but otherwise, other than that, you have to go over to Fort Myers Beach or Sanibel. Punta Gorda, no beach. Northport, no beach. Now again, they're nearby, but some people want to live in a town where there actually is a beach. And that sort of takes away from that resort style feeling. So for all the people that left their cities up north because they just didn't like policy and they didn't like what was going on in their cities, so they thought, okay, you know, I'm going to accelerate things and I'm going to move to Florida now. At the 3-year mark, at the 5-year mark, sometimes people kind of feel like the Florida experiment has run its course and they're ready to go. And that's why you have to really take some of these predictions, at least in your mind. You have to think through them, because the last thing you want to do is overpay and be the person in that position.